like to turn to James. We'll be beginning there this morning. Guess you know what the sermon's about.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. I don't mean to distract you without being up there. I hit blank and I don't know why it changed. Perhaps that expires. I'm really not sure. Or maybe I did something else wrong. Who knows? My experience, which is limited, on Facebook, which is also limited but not as limited as it ought to be, is that the most common theological error that is traded or asserted or whatever, however you would say that, begins with the sentence, if God was real, there is no way that he would allow something to happen. People have the power of observation. They look in the world around them. They see things going badly for people, and they say, God, if God was good, he wouldn't allow that. If God existed, he wouldn't allow that. We see this in many forms, but that is probably at the heart of it the thing that I bump into the most. And a couple of weeks ago, I saw it again, and by again I mean probably many times in the same week. And I've addressed this with people before, and had individual conversations and group conversations about the impact of that, or the implications of the thought process behind that, or the misunderstanding about God's nature. So I'd like to talk about that a little bit now. It seemed appropriate. We look at James, and we're just going to be really focusing on James 2 through 4 at the start here, and then moving on to some other passages. Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds. For you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness, and let steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. So when we discuss the suffering that's going around us, we're looking at people who are experiencing a trial, right? That's the term that's used here. And a point that is made frequently and cannot be made frequently enough is that trials are something that we will meet no matter what. And I won't spend long dwelling on this point, but we will be returning to it later. The phrase is when you meet. So literally, not a question of if, but when. It is not count it all joy, my brothers, if you meet trials. It is count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials. And this would mimic very closely the concept from 1 Peter 4 and verse 12. Beloved, do not be surprised at the fiery trial when it comes upon you to test you, as though something strange were happening to you. But rejoice insofar as you share Christ's suffering, that you may also rejoice and be glad when his glory is revealed. Another instance of this being discussed would be from Philippians. And notice here that both 1 Peter and James mention joy associated with the trials that we face. And then Philippians, which is a letter of joy, in chapter 1 and verse 29, for it has been granted you for the sake of Christ that you should not only believe in him, but suffer for his sake. Okay, and this address to living for Christ, the idea is if you're living for Christ, you're going to suffer for Christ. That's a given. That's what you signed up for. And frankly, part of me wants to stop now because we could spend a lot of time just on these 3 verses. Even if we just read them over and over again for the next 30 minutes, we might do better than what I'm about to do to you. You know, that possibility does exist. I hope not. But the fact is that we could stop here and try to dwell on this. These are 3 verses and the surrounding area that would be a great meditative focus, just like that, all on its own. But so that I can make it difficult. Let's look this a little further. James 1, 2 through 4. Trials of various kinds, for you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness. Okay, so a discussion about trials includes the idea of what trials do. It's not a question of if, but when. The testing of your faith produces steadfastness. What do we learn from this? Regardless of the cause, trials are an opportunity to build faith. We're going to face a trial. What are we going to do with the trial when we face it? That's the next thing that we're talking about here. And I want to point out that, in fact, this is what I'm going to be pointing out throughout the entire time I spend here this morning. We're not in a position to know everything, and we're not in a position, always, perhaps most of the time, maybe ever, to know why we face the trial we face. The admonishment, though, is to count it as an opportunity to build your faith no matter what. Regardless of cause, trials are an opportunity to build faith. Let me try to think of an example here. We can be in a situation where the trial itself is an opportunity to build faith. I have a neighbor who's arguing with me about the scripture. So I'm going to study more so I can deal with that trial. Okay? In that process, my faith is built. But it is also built in the sense that I cannot for the life of me figure out why I have to live with an ugly neighbor. Okay? And I might never know, and I might hope that the opportunity to study is the reason why, but God has a plan, and I'm not in a position to know that for sure. And that on its own is an opportunity for faith to be built. We have an inability to know the cause. We may think, we may highly suspect, we might see a pattern, we might have good reason to believe something is the case, but in many instances it's possible that we will not know exactly why this particular trial is the one that's put in front of us. It could be God's will. It could be unhappy coincidence. Okay, this is just, the I don't want to say the luck of the draw, that sounds terrible from up here, but this idea that, stuff happens. It could be a result of my obedience. Okay, if faith builds steadfastness, maybe God is putting upon me another trial to continue to build myself. It could be a result of my disobedience. And so one of the things I'm going to try to illustrate in the next little section here is the idea that all of these still leave us with the reason that the inability to know the cause is reason enough to grow in faith. It illustrates to us that if we cannot be positive about this, we must then just be faithful. Let's just do that. Is this happening because I'm doing something wrong? Sure, we need to know that we're doing, well. But we might not have all the answers. And so that fact on its own is enough to understand that our faith is being challenged and needs to grow. So these examples we review may include any or all of these causes. And I'd like to provide some illustration in here. But first, some more organization. There's variation in trial. James 1:2-4 again. When you meet trials of various kinds. Now, I don't know exactly what he meant by that, other than that you're going to experience, one Christian will experience this trial, and one Christian will experience a different one. Okay? He doesn't elaborate why that may be the case, but it occurs to me that if we were to split up trials, and this is the point at which I would encourage you to stop taking notes, because we're going to pick this apart a little bit later. If there's trials, there's not experiencing something good, and there's experiencing something bad. Okay? Those are the two categories. If you were to state them positively, negatively, I'm suffering because I don't have something that is good, or I'm suffering because I do have something that I don't want to have, that's bad. Okay? An example of not experiencing something good. Recently we've been discussing faithful women that were longing for children. I think this is an example of this. Sarah, Hannah, Elizabeth is looking at them. These are women who want a child, and this is a good thing that they want. They have good reason to want that good thing, but they don't have it. Moses looking into the promised land. Okay? He faced a lot of trials. But at the end of his life, if you look at Deuteronomy 3:23, look at Moses' attitude here. I pleaded with the Lord at that time, saying, O Lord God, you have only begun to show your servant your greatness and your mighty hand. Moses recognizes God has good. What God wills is good. For what God is there in heaven or on earth who can do such works and mighty acts as yours. Please let me go over and see the good land beyond the Jordan, that good country and Lebanon. Okay, so good land, good hill country. He sees God has a plan for me, and what it is, there's good stuff over there. I want that stuff. But the Lord was angry with me because of you and would not listen to me. And the Lord said, enough from you, do not speak to me of this matter again. Go up to the top of Pisgah and lift your eyes westward and northward and southward and eastward and look at it with your eyes, for you shall not go over. What Moses wanted, was it good? Was it God's will for him to have that particular good thing? It was not. Did Moses have an understanding of why he was not allowed to have it? That is true. At the same time, still an opportunity to build his faith. This is God's will. I need to accept it. Lest I look arrogant, I want to remind you all and myself, I would not have the good attitude about this that Moses is having here. I just want to throw that out there. To the extent that Moses is saying, look, I've accepted this as the case, okay, I would struggle in that situation. And this is kind of why I'm looking at this now, because if we were to make a yearbook of this congregation, the student in the class most likely be voted bad attitude. I'd probably be the person on that little picture. So, Paul visiting the Thessalonians. If you turn to 1 Thessalonians 2, he's speaking to Men that really need his help. People that really need his help. And he's acknowledging this. We were torn away from you, brothers, for a short time in person, but not in heart. And we endeavored the more eagerly and with great desire to see you face to face, because I wanted to come to you, I, Paul, again and again, but Satan hindered us. Okay? Does Paul want good things for the Thessalonians? He certainly does. Do the Thessalonians recognize there are good things to be received from Paul? They certainly do. But for whatever reason, in this instance, Paul identifies Satan specifically. The point is being made, this good thing is not achievable at the moment. And that needs to be accepted until God's will intends otherwise. So, not experiencing something good. Here's some experiencing something bad. Paul's journeys, his list of sufferings that he faced from 2 Corinthians 11. 3 times I was beaten with rods, so we would define that as bad. From our perspective, we would call it bad. Once I was stoned. 3 times I was shipwrecked. A night and a day I was adrift at sea on frequent journeys, in danger from rivers, danger from robbers, danger from my own people, danger from the Gentiles, danger in the city, danger in the wilderness, danger at sea, danger from false brothers. In toil and hardship, through many a sleepless night, in hunger and thirst, often without food, in cold and exposure. Then he goes on to talk about what a stress the spiritual well-being of the brethren is for him. Okay? But where Moses is saying, good, and I can't have it. Paul's saying, danger, 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 and I've got all of it. Right? Both suffering. Both facing a trial there. The Tower of Siloam, this falls under this category of, God's will, not God's will. Things happen to people. From Luke 13, there was some present at the time who told him about the Galileans whose blood Pilate had mingled with their sacrifices. And Jesus said to them, do you think that these Galileans were worse sinners than all the others because they suffered? No, I tell you, but unless you repent, you will all likewise perish. Or those 18 on whom the Tower of Siloam fell and killed them, do you think that they were worse offenders than the others who lived in Jerusalem? No, I tell you, unless you repent, you will likewise perish. Those people in the tower had families. Those families suffered a loss there. Okay, we don't know more about that than this, but the point is, a tower fell down. Gravity works that way. Okay. And if you're in a situation where gravity has done you wrong, God, why did you allow this to happen? Or, whatever might be going on there, the idea is that I'm suffering right now, but you know what? Suffering, experiencing this trial, can produce faith in me if I have that attitude. So moving on. Trials divided into not experiencing something good and experiencing something bad. I want to pursue this one a little further, not experiencing something good. So we're going to take that, put it over here. You can divide this a little further. Good things are not yet experienced. Another thing, those good things that you want, but you haven't yet experienced them, and good things that have been experienced, but then have been removed from you. Pre-King David, in all his suffering, okay? There are good things out there for him. He's been anointed. He understands that he is purposed for the authority over the Israelites. He's a man after God's own heart. But boy, he's suffering, and boy, he's suffering, and boy, he's suffering. And good things are coming, but in the meantime, he's suffering. Again, the women with the children. This is a good thing that they want that they have not yet had. The Israelites in bondage, obviously the nation itself is at different periods in this cycle, but at certain times, all they have known their whole life is suffering. The individuals of any particular generation, and they know good things have been promised. They could go and read as the prophet did and understand that one day they will be returned out of this, but in the meantime, they suffer. Then we have good things that are experienced but removed. Job is a great example of this. He has everything he could possibly want, but then one day it's taken away from him. Okay, a good thing experienced and taken away, they're suffering. The Christians in Acts 2, if you look at the end of Acts 2, day by day attending the temple together and breaking bread in their homes, they received their food with glad and generous hearts, praising God and having favor with all the people, and the Lord added to their number day by day those who were being saved. Is this good stuff going on? It certainly is. By chapter 8, Saul approved of Stephen's execution, and there arose on that day a great persecution against the church in Jerusalem, and they were all scattered throughout all the regions of Judea and Samaria except the apostles. Okay. More on what's good and what's bad later, but at the moment, consider this from their perspective. We had lots of good things, and those things are going away. We are no longer attending temple together, breaking bread in each other's homes. We've had the glad and generous heart, and now it's time to hunker down, because those things have been removed. Those good things have disappeared for us. And again, I don't want to be absolute in the labels of what this situation implies about their growth. We will discuss it again later. Again, Paul's relationship with the church in Ephesus in particular this time, from Acts 20. He's gathered them together because he doesn't expect to see them again, and he speaks to them words of encouragement and warning, and he kneels down and prays with them all. At verse 37, and there was much weeping on the part of all. They embraced Paul and kissed him, being sorrowful most of all because of the word he had spoken, that they would not see his face again, and they accompanied him to the ship. Their understanding is that we've had this good thing, and now this good thing is, we don't have that same relationship with that good thing anymore. We are no longer going to see you. We've been encouraged by you in this way, and now you are departing from us. And we would call that bad. So what do we do when good things are experienced but then removed? Here's the verse again. Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds, for you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness, and let steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. Let's focus on this. The testing of your faith produces steadfastness. How does that work? Let's remember. Trials test faith. Okay? Tested faith produces greater patience. I'm just kind of breaking open what's going on here. Steadfastness has its full effect. So patience grows to greater effect as trials continue. So, it's not a once and done thing. The trial starts. If you have the right attitude, your faith and your patience increase. And then as you continue to suffer that, it's not like these two things bump alongside each other. Here's faith and here's the trial, and they go like this. The idea is as the trial continues, your faith goes like this. They don't run parallel, right? There's growth throughout that. Patience grows to greater effect. To what purpose? That you may be perfect and complete, leading to perfection, ultimately suited for the work, lacking in nothing. So there's suited, and then there's ultimately very suited. You are complete, totally suited. I'm not sure what more I learned from this other than there's emphasis here in the process. The growth continues. The growth is greater. The trials may come, may go, but the growth of patience remains the same. So in every case, trust God. Where does that get us? How do I trust God when? Can you tell this is kind of a out of George's question, sort of a sermon? So I've gotten this far, and okay, but what about? Some things that we need to remember. At best, life is an opportunity to do the work. I don't know what I'm serving by saying at best. Life is an opportunity to do the work. If you kept your thumb in Acts 20 there, look at what he says to them before their moment of sadness. Acts 20, 35. We had just read 36 through 38. This Bible of mine is in all things I have shown you that by working hard in this way we must help the weak and remember the words of the Lord, how he himself said it is more blessed to give than to receive. I'm leaving y'all. I've been here, that's been great, but God didn't put you on this earth to be encouraged by Paul, per se. You were put here to get the work done. And the work remains. Remember, best life is an opportunity to work. Remember, God gives us what we need to work. In this instance, Paul showed them how to accomplish the work. This happened to the apostles too when Jesus ascends from Luke 24. Yeah, Luke 24. Then he opened their minds to understand the scriptures and said to them, thus it is written that the Christ should suffer on the third day and rise from the dead, and that repentance for the forgiveness of sin should be proclaimed in his name to all nations, beginning from Jerusalem. I've equipped you, verse 45, to do the work, that is verse 47. Proclaim his name to all nations. You are witness of these things, and then he quips them again. Behold, I am sending the promise of my Father upon you, but stay in the city until you are clothed with power from on high. This is not an Israelites in Egypt situation where they're supposed to make bricks without straw. They've been assigned the work, the apostles, the Christians have been assigned the work, and they've been given the tools to do the work. And Jesus is about to leave. So they're about to suffer what I would describe as loss myself. From my human perspective, they're about to suffer a loss. Are they really? Because there's a lot more going on here, and we know that. But the idea is that you've been given a job. I'm stepping back. You've been given a job. Here's the tools. Remember, do the job. Right? That's essentially what's going on there. So, don't be discouraged. We have what we need to do the work. Remember that nothing is too great for God. This is a great lesson to be learned from Abraham when he was about to sacrifice Isaac. If you'll turn to Genesis. Genesis 22. After these things, God tested Abraham and said, Abraham! And he said, here I am. And if I was Abraham by this point, we've been studying Abraham on Thursday nights. God says Abraham, and if George is Abraham, I'm going, what's it going to be this time? Right? I'm wise to you. After these things, God tested Abraham and said, Abraham, and he said commendably, here I am. And he said, take your only son, that is, your only son Isaac, that is, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains of which I shall tell you. I can't really produce this scenario in my head. It's too difficult. So Abraham rose early in the morning and saddled his donkey and, to effect, did all the things that he was asked to do. He cut the wood for the burnt offering and rose and went to the place God had told him. On the third day, Abraham lifted his eyes and saw the place from afar. You want to talk about a trial? He's got 3 days to try to have a good attitude about this. Then Abraham said to his young man, stay here with the donkey. I and the boy will go over there and worship and come again to you. And Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering and laid it on Isaac, his son. And he took in his hand the fire and the knife. So they went, both of them, together. And Isaac said to his father, Abraham, my father. And he said, here I am. And Isaac said, behold, the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb? And Abraham said, remember, nothing is too great for God. God will provide for himself the lamb for a burnt offering. God will provide. Job, who has lost everything. He had it all, and now his trial's that it's all gone. He had, but there was still something to be learned. So faithful, and there was still, through the trial, an increase. He was so faithful. God's point at the beginning is that have you considered my servant Job? There's nobody else like him. So faithful, yet there's a trial, and by Job 42, Job has learned something more. Job has more faith. Job says, I know that you can do all things and that no purpose of yours can be thwarted. When good things are experienced but then removed, we need to remember that nothing is too great for God. David, when he lost his son, let's spend a little bit more time at this one. I want to read it all for the context because the impact of David's choices here are of enormous benefit for us to understand. 12:15. 2 Samuel 12:15. The Lord afflicted the child that Uriah's wife Bathsheba had borne to David, and he became sick, and David therefore sought God on behalf of the child. And David fasted and went in and lay all night on the ground, and the elders of his house stood beside him to raise him from the ground, but he would not, nor did he eat food with them. On the 7th day, the child died. And the servants of David were afraid to tell him the child was dead, for they said, behold, while the child was alive, we spoke to him, and he did not listen. How then can we say to him, the child is dead? He may do himself some harm. They recognize David's suffering. David's not only suffering, David's suffering the fact that his suffering is a result of the consequences of, his behavior. So there's compound suffering. But when David saw that his servants were whispering together, David understood that the child had died. And he said, "Is the child dead?" And they said, "He is dead." So David rose from the earth and washed and anointed himself and changed his clothes. And he went into his own house. He went into the house of the Lord and worshipped, and they went to his own house. And when he asked, they set food before him, and he ate. And his servants said to him, they're confused, "What is this thing you have done? You fasted and wept for the child while he was alive, but when the child died, you rose and ate." And he said, "While the child was alive, I fasted and wept, for I said, who knows whether the Lord will be gracious to me, that the child may live." Now, God's choice was otherwise, but David recognized God could do it if he chose to. But now he is dead. Why should I fast? Can I bring him back again? I shall go to him, but he will not return to me. So not only does David know that God can do what he wants, but he recognizes God's power anyway. Do I say here, both the innocent child and the sinful man were saved? Okay. David still has a good attitude. He still has the perspective. His premise is that I haven't been promised a healthy child. I have been promised that if I'm obedient, God will save a very spiritually unhealthy me. Right? That is a difficult, that's an extraordinary point of clarity to have in an emotionally trying time. Okay? If you lose something that important to you, haven't been there yet, can't say with the confidence that I should, that I will be able to take this approach. But the idea is, I have just suffered a loss that God never guaranteed. Will I lose my faith over this? Or will I remember that the loss that I was guaranteed to suffer, that God promised me I might not if I was obedient? Okay? There's some artistic, descriptive beauty in this too, because he wants to be with his son. And his perspective is that I will be with my son, just not the way that I want it. Right? Why did he want his son to live? Because he wanted to be with his son. He'll be with his son. Because God still did that work. We need to remember that sin is not near us. I meant to say remember. Sin is not near us if we are near him. So let's look at what David says a little bit more. From Psalm 139. And we will be returning to this if you'd like to stick your thumb here. Psalm 139, from verse 19. "Oh, that you would slay the wicked, O God. O men of blood, depart from me. They speak against you with malicious intent. Your enemies take your name in vain. Do I not hate those who hate you, O Lord? And do I not loathe those who rise up against you? I hate them with complete hatred. I count them my enemy. Search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me and know my thoughts, and see if there be a grievous way in me, and lead me in a way everlasting." David suffers. We see him suffer before he's king. We see him suffer after he's king. We see him suffer bad things. We see him suffer from not having the good things that could come. We see him suffering from the good things that he had being taken away. But at some point in all this that was going on in his life, he managed to remember that if there be a grievous way in him, God should lead. Just trust God. In every case, just go ahead and trust God. See if you can pull that off. And remember that God does indeed have a plan. It makes me think of Genesis, Joseph, from Genesis 45. We know what happens with Joseph as he's sold into slavery by his brothers. He ends up being falsely accused when he's in Egypt. He keeps on gaining successes through his faith. And he keeps on suffering. But there's a moment of clarity for a whole lot of people in the room. In Genesis 45, when he reveals himself to his brothers as a result of the famine. And look what he says. Verse 7, "God sent me before you to preserve you for a remnant on the earth, and to keep alive for you many survivors. So, it was not you who sent me here, but God." We are not disadvantaged. But we need to remember that even if we do not know exactly what the plan is, we know that God has a plan. We know that God has a plan. On that basis, we should be able to continue in faith. Here are some things we can be doing. The next bullet point here is effectively, I call it a Papa Bear lesson from the Berenstain Bears, because he always shows you the wrong way. So we're going to look at a wrong way. Here's something you should not be doing. Remember, a physically good thing can become or expose a spiritual stumbling block. Remember, this is what Lee talked about the last 3 Sundays, at least in heart. So if you don't remember, it's not my fault. Let's look at Jonah. This is after he's been spewed up by the fish, and he's finally gone into Nineveh, and he's preached, and then he's brought out, and I'm going to pick up in verse 5 of Jonah 4. Jonah went out of the city and sat on the east of the city and made a booth for himself there. He sat under it in the shade till he should see what should become of the city. Now the Lord God appointed a plant and made it come up over Jonah, that it might be a shade over his head to save him from his discomfort. So Jonah was exceedingly glad because of the plant. But when dawn came up the next day, God appointed a worm that attacked the plant so that it withered. When the sun rose, God appointed a scorching east wind, and the sun beat down on the head of Jonah so that he was faint. And he asked that he might die, and said, "It is better for me to die than to live." But God said to Jonah, "Do you do well to be angry for the plant?" And Jonah said, "Yes, I do well to be angry enough to die." And the Lord said, "You pity the plant, for which you did not labor, nor did you make it grow, which came into being in a night, and perished in a night. And should not I pity Nineveh, the great city, in which there are more than 12,000 persons who do not know their right hand from their left, and also much cattle?" Who happened? Who has control in this situation? The Lord God appointed. God appointed. God appointed. I don't know why I have was faint there. Oh, well, God made him faint. And should I not pity? God is pointing out here that he happened. I am in control, Jonah. Who happened to? You didn't labor. You didn't make it grow. Look at the grammar. Look at the way this is structured up here. With the exception of making the booth for himself. A plant that it might come up over Jonah. It might be a shade over his head to save him from his discomfort. And then we have his reaction. He's exceedingly glad. Okay, he's experiencing a good thing. But all these things are happening to him. You did not labor. You did not make it. Jonah, you're just sitting there. And all these things are happening to you, and you're having a reaction to those things. You're experiencing emotional ups and downs. Right? But this is hardly the work that God has set for him, to sit there and wait for this to happen, right? Who took it upon himself to know better than God because his emotions deceived him? He asked that he might die. It is better for me to die. I do well to be angry. I don't really feel like standing next to Jonah right now, you know? Note that Jonah could control his attitude. Do I circle it? He was exceedingly glad. The plant came up and he chose to have a particular response to this. He was glad, maybe unconsciously, but he has the power to be glad, and he has the power to be angry. Okay, there are some things that Jonah can control, and he chose not to. Note that God's purpose in appointing and removing the plant were for Jonah's benefit, so that it might be a shade over his head to save him from his discomfort. This is a good thing. This is a good thing. He's suffering, and he has been alleviated from that suffering with something that God has provided. How else could you describe this thing? It's a good thing. But there was a second lesson. There was the ultimate one. Because Jonah's attitude is suffering here, and God has a point that needs to be made. And that is, you care about the plant, but not about the people. Right? Jonah is, newsflash, a mess. We're a mess. I think one of the reasons why this frightens me so much is because I identify with it so much. More on that in a moment. Note that Jonah's frustration with God set him up. Let's look at that. Let's back up to the end of chapter 3 and the beginning of chapter 4. When God saw that the Ninevites, how they had turned from their evil, God relented of the disaster that he had said he would do to them, and he did not do it. But he was displeased, but it displeased Jonah exceedingly, and he was angry. And he prayed to the Lord and said, O Lord, is not this what I said when I was yet in my country? That is why I made haste to flee to Tarshish, for I knew that you are a gracious God, and merciful, and slow to anger, and abounding in steadfast love, and relenting from disaster. Therefore now, O Lord, please take my life from me, for it is better for me to die than to live. Note that what little good Jonah had was at the expense of the perfect. I've talked about this before. We have to make decisions, and when we make decisions in faith, we're trusting God's plan to lead us in a particular direction. We've talked about this with jobs, at least in class. I know I'm going to have to not be there on Sundays, but I really need the job. Or I'm going to have faith, and God is going to provide something more along the lines of what I need, right? We understand that. So, Jonah here is about to experience the joy of a plant that God gave him. A plant to save him from the sun. And look at his attitude towards grace and mercy and steadfast love. God has a purpose. God has a purpose. You know, what can God do for me? He can give me a plant. And I'm going to hone in on the plant and miss who God is. Every now and then we'll bump into a Watchtower Jehovah's Witness type. And when they hand out a flyer, there's usually a depiction of heaven in it. And the one that will stick with me forever, and this was entirely sincere on the part of the Jehovah's Witness that handed this to me, browsing through it, this was their attempt to describe heaven, and it depicted kimono-wearing Westerners riding on the backs of elephants, sipping a glass of I don't know what, but it had one of those little straw umbrella things in it. It was like an iced tea or whatever. Okay, you know, that's in the literature. You know, we're all going to get along, and this is what it's going to look like. And I think, how sad. Okay, what can God give me? An iced tea and a ride on the back of an elephant. Maybe God, with God, all things are possible. But at the same time, look what He has to offer instead. And because Jonah was upset, he missed it. Let that not be us. So, if you're upset for losing a good thing, you could pray like Jonah. Lord, I know you better than you know yourself. You tricked me with your grace and mercy and steadfast love. Please kill me. That is where this attitude gets you when something is taken from you that you were not promised. If you're upset for losing a good thing, you could behave like Jonah. Stake out and wait for God to do something that He didn't promise. I'm going to stop doing the work. I'm going to sit out on a hill and waste my life looking for something that God has not guaranteed to me. Argue with God about the merits of His character. God, from Facebook, how could you let such a thing happen? Display utter disregard for the people that surround you that He sent you to teach. What is our job? Okay, we're supposed to make His name known wherever we go. Jonah was sent to Nineveh to do the same thing, to call on them to repent. Now, can you imagine being a Ninevite? This guy comes through your city. You do everything you can to prove your repentance, and then you watch the man climb up on a hill and fight with God about whether or not He's going to destroy you. How discouraging. And the thing is that we could put ourselves there pretty easily. I'm discouraged and I'm going to be upset about God's will for me right now, and that's going to make me struggle in my relationships with the people in the neighborhood, and I'm going to have issues. That is not a good example. That is about as acutely discouraging as you could possibly be to somebody who might remotely be interested in understanding the truth and learning through your behavior. They're watching. So, don't do this. Don't do this. I'm not preaching to do this. Don't do this. Don't do this. Investigate your premise. So I want to look back at my premise, which was, good things are experienced but then removed. I categorized it out here. We've got trials, and the trials split into the trials of negative and positive, and then out of the negative ones, we haven't had them yet, and, well, anyway, we got down to this. Good things are experienced but then removed. Good things, okay. Do I really know best what is good? Because if I've learned anything, and anything that I'm reading here is that very often I do not. Did Joseph believe it was good for him to be tossed into a well and left for dead? Probably not. Okay. later on, he understood. Is weak faith in the good blinding me from strong faith in the perfect? I've had this good thing. It's been a good thing. And it's going away. God, how can you do this to me? Wait. Okay? I might not rejoin them. He will not rejoin me, but I may rejoin them. Right? That's kind of what's going on here. We need to recognize that the promises God has actually made to us are greater than the things that we mourn when we lose them. We mourn, ideally, I'm not sure how this works, but when we lose our salvation, let's mourn. Right? But until that time comes, all else is bonus. Experienced. Good things are experienced. Is my faith based on my happy experience? How is that faith at all? Jonah's here and he's happy and the relationship's kind of getting a little bit better because he got a plant. Yay! He got a plant. And he bases where he's at emotionally on the fact that he had that plant, and then the plant is gone and he has lost his grounding because the thing that grounded him is gone. This is a big area. This is a big problem for me. But it's but a word that indicates I have faith. I'm trying to point out here that at this point this statement lacks a lot of understanding. Okay, it's a natural place to go, which is why I've kind of dug into this thing, but I'm trying to back us back out. But then removed. We had good things and then the good things went away. Am I in a position to assert it was removed? Did the apostles assert, Jesus has ascended, he's gone? No. He's not gone. The position has, I'll say, evolved. It's changed. It's not the way that we have become habitually accustomed to experiencing this, but it's not removed. Did I have what I thought I had? Have I really lost it? Was it mine to lose? The plant came, the plant went. Jonah had nothing to do with that. He was happy because of the plant. He was sad because of the plant. And look how quickly it just went from faith in God and God's work for him to, there's a plant. Yay! It's not a plant. Oh. This is a George problem. Here's the way it looks. Trials, not experiencing something good and experiencing something bad. Good things not yet experienced and good things are experienced but then removed. And we did all that, but what does it matter? We learned from this category, which I kind of pursued, God intends for us to work. God gave us what we need to work. Nothing is too great for him. God separates us from sin. Just like sin separates us from God, God separates us from sin. And God has a plan. Those are the things that we've been promised. These things could be our perspective here. And I mean not just here, but here. Before the trial, wherever we are at, whenever we come into an understanding that we have accepted God's salvation and we become immersed in his death and raised to live like him, wherever that position finds us, we dry off and then, okay, we need to expect a trial. Here we are, we're expecting a trial. This should be our perspective. Always. We don't have to work our way through and then start trying to remember these things. This is supposed to be the point from the beginning, which is why James says what he says, which is why it says what it says in 1 Peter. This is the path by which trials produce steadfastness. The solution to the trial is to do what you are supposed to do. So what I have done is taken a very obvious thing and talked about it for 30 minutes. Okay. Hopefully it's been helpful. Faithful people that we looked at here continued in their trials what they had practiced for life. For life. Trials, no trials. Plant, no plant. Sun, no sun. What was the promise? Salvation is the promise. Consequently, focusing on God's promises and not happenstance, that is, don't look at it in terms of trials versus no longer experiencing the trials and I'm saved from my discomfort. This is not the way to think about it. Focusing on God's promises is what produces joy. James 1, 2, count it all joy, my brothers. How do we get to the joy? We stop thinking in terms of trials and no trials. It's life. We don't get all the answers. We're not qualified to know. We just do what we've been told in faith that we're supposed to do, and we can have joy in that, whether we're shaded by a plant or not. So dwell on the promises only. Turn back to Psalm 139. I'm going to finish up essentially, with just reading Psalm 139, because, and you could probably do this in any psalm, but this is the one I had been studying when I was working on this, and it occurred to me by the time I got to here, that when you think about what David is praying to God about and for, he knows, I say David, I don't actually know it's David here, I don't know why I still think it's David. Oh yeah, it is David. It is David. He knows what to ask for. This is a psalm that addresses the promises only. It acknowledges the promises only. Look for these concepts. When you dwell on the promises, you will not fear evil. You will not place your faith in the easy. My life has been easier now because God sent me something. And when God takes it away, my faith is gone. No. You will not be in that situation either way. You will not be injured by a physical loss. You will be able to identify the greatness of his plan. You will appreciate his righteousness and mercy and love because you haven't been focused on something you should not have been. You will grow to greater faith and patience because that's what James says happens. You will clothe yourself in practiced humility. Look for that attitude when we read Psalm 139. You will do the work without question. You will be shielded from sin. Look for this in this psalm. And you will be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. Psalm 139, and then I will be done. I will sit down when I am done reading this psalm. What did I just do? Psalm 139. O Lord, you have searched me and known me. You know when I sit down and when I rise. You discern my thoughts from afar. You search out my path and my lying down and are acquainted with all my ways. Even before there is a word on my tongue, behold, O Lord, you know it altogether. You hem me in, behind and before. You lay your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is high, and I cannot attain it. Trials, but faith, because there's no other way. Where shall I go from your spirit? Or where shall I flee from your presence? You know something Jonah didn't. If I ascend to heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in Sheol, you are there. If I take the wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, even there your hand shall lead me, and your right hand shall hold me. If I say, surely the darkness shall cover me, and the light about me be night, even the darkness is not dark for you. The night is bright as day, and darkness is as light with you. It's about perspective. Okay? I'm in darkness, but I'm not actually. For you formed my inward parts. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works. My soul knows it very well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was being made in secret, intricately woven in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw my unformed substance. In your book were written, every one of them, the days that were formed for me, when as yet there was none of them. God has a plan. How precious to me are your thoughts, O God, how vast the sum. If I would count them, they are more than the sand. I awake, and I am still with you. Oh, that you would slay the wicked, O God. O men of blood, depart from me. They speak against you with malicious intent. Your enemies take your name in vain. Do I not hate those who hate you, O Lord? Do I not loathe those who rise up against you? I hate them with complete hatred, and I count them as my enemies. Search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me and know my thoughts, and see if there be any grievous way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting. Appreciate your attention. Thank you.